Welcome to the ANEW Insight Podcast, empowering and inspiring your journey to optimal health. Hosted by Dr. Supatra Tovar, clinical psychologist, registered dietitian, fitness expert, and author of Deprogram Diet Culture. Rethink your relationship with food, heal your mind, and live a diet-free life. I follow my guests' journey to optimal health, providing you with the keys to unlock your own wellness path. Tune in and evolve with us. Welcome back to the ANEW Insight Podcast. We are back for the second half of our interview with health coach, author, and weight loss for food lovers podcaster, Molly Zemek. Molly gave us some invaluable insight into her inspiration to spread her message of resilience and success in weight loss. We cannot wait to learn more. Welcome back, Molly.
Thanks so much for having me, Dr. Tovar. Good to be here.
Oh, we're so glad to have you. Now, we talked a lot about weight loss in the first part of this episode. And this second half, we also want to touch in on something that I don't think a lot of people talk about in terms of weight loss, but it was the drinking portion of what you were engaging in before.
Yes.
And I know, especially during the pandemic, it was all about quarantinis. It was about whatever wine o'clock that would help us get through the pandemic. So tell people about your revelations about your drinking and why you were engaging in that. And then how did you learn how to have a healthier relationship with alcohol?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mentioned in the first part of the podcast about being trained as a sommelier and my real passion for wine. In fact, I was the person that people would call for wine advice. Oh, could you recommend a good wine? I enjoyed it. It was very much part of the fine dining world that I was involved in as a chef. So I'd never in a million years imagine myself as somebody who was not drinking on a regular basis. It was just very much a part of my identity. But when I was in my 40s, around the time that I embarked on this journey of weight loss, I started waking up in the middle of the night with a lot of anxiety. And all I can say, Dr. Tovar, is that I had this intuitive sense that it was the drinking. Again, I never considered myself an alcoholic. I would have maybe 2 to 3 glasses of wine, but it was affecting me in a very negative way. It became clear to me through this intuitive sense that the wine was a problem. It was about 2 years before I decided to do anything about it. I had this awareness that the drinking was holding me back, that it was affecting me, that it just wasn't having a positive influence on my life. But I couldn't imagine myself not drinking. Like it was part of my family. I mean, my Italian ancestors made wine in their basement. It was part of the food culture that I was deeply embedded in. And so I really wasn't ready to admit that I needed to change. I didn't tell my husband. I just sat with this awareness that was coming from my body. I listened to my body. I sat with it, but I wasn't willing to do anything. And I started on the journey that I described to you in the last episode about changing my relationship with food. And I just said to myself, I'm not going to do anything different with the drinking right now. I'm going to just focus on the food, pay attention to the overeating, practice listening to urges and doing all of the work surrounding that. But what happened, and you and your listeners can probably relate to this, is that the more that I started listening to my body and the better I felt, the more obvious it became that the drinking was really having a negative impact on me.
Totally. Say more. Yes.
And so it was like, how can I continue doing all of this work on my emotional life, on my mental health, on my relationship with food, and then continue to drink and feel terrible and not sleep well, wake up in a worse mood. And it was contradictory. And so I started to apply the same approach to drinking that I did with food. I started to just really give myself some distance from the drinking, whereas I didn't restrict it because I didn't want to tell myself you can never have a glass of wine. I could tell, just like I know with food, that would create a lot more temptation for it. That if it was off limits, it would become the forbidden fruit. But I just said, it's not off limits, but I'm just going to give myself a little bit of a break and see how I feel without it. And I thought of it as an experiment. And I started during my journey with my podcast listeners. I started talking about it inside of my program. And I started having more and more people come to me who needed help with their drinking. Because my whole approach to this was that I'm not interested in giving up drinking. I don't feel like I need to swear it off. Again, I'm not an alcoholic. I don't feel like I need to do that. But I also want to just feel more in control. I want to be able to drink less. I don't want to be somebody who's drinking every night just because it really affects me in a negative way. So I started really being a lot more thoughtful about when I would drink. I started listening to my body more. I started making decisions ahead of time and really following through on my plan. And I started to lose desire for it and simultaneously find new ways to enjoy myself without drinking, find new ways to connect with people without drinking. And so it's just interesting how much this resonates with people who want to be able to drink less, but don't want to have to give it up altogether and maybe feeling like they're not sure how to do that. And what I learned is that for the right kind of person who's not an alcoholic, who doesn't feel like they're physically dependent, you can have a different relationship with alcohol. You can learn how to drink less. You can be a lot more mindful, and you can have a totally different experience with it.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I'm so on board with you because that's exactly what I went through. And I had the same inkling. A big part of my inability to lose weight or just feeling stuck had a lot to do with drinking as well.
Yes.
As just not having the complete awareness about how drinking was affecting my body. Give a picture of how you experienced effects. And maybe this will help people just turn that little light switch on and see that they may be experiencing the same thing. And if they're like both of us and we're not restrictive and we don't want to give something up, how can they go about reducing or just becoming more aware or more intentional with their drinking?
Yeah. Well, it really starts with listening to your body, like I've said before. And that's where it started for me. I started paying attention to the anxiety that I was feeling. For a long time, I thought that the anxiety was just something that I inherited from my mom, who always dealt with anxiety. Well, she's a drinker too. And so I didn't realize the connection between alcohol and anxiety until I gave myself a break from drinking. I'm like, oh, wow, I'm not experiencing any anxiety. That's amazing. What relief to not be dealing with this anxiety. So that was one symptom for me, was just increased anxiety from drinking. And it got worse the older I got. Inability to sleep, which is another terrible thing that happens from drinking, is waking up in the middle of the night after a couple of hours and not being able to sleep for 3 to 4 hours, feeling completely drained the next day, increased cravings to eat. I'm sure a lot of your listeners who drink can relate to this, just mindless eating, a lot more mindless eating when I was drinking, and then feeling physically worse as a result of that. Let's see, there was one other thing that I was thinking of related to drinking. Yeah, irritability. Depression. Yeah. And anxiety is as correlated with depression. So it was, also indigestion and acid reflux. Once I dramatically cut back on my drinking, all of that went away. And that was just such relief as well. So that is a little bit of the picture of what I was experiencing from the drinking. Sometimes you don't know until you actually take a break from something. It's just like with food allergies. You don't always know. And it's like, oh, wow, I'm not feeling this way. And I haven't been drinking for the last couple of days. Wow, I didn't realize alcohol was having that effect on my system. Another thing that people describe to me who need help with this is just the constant thinking about alcohol, constantly anticipating it, revolving your schedule around when you can have that drink. And just a lot of people who decide that they want to change their relationship with alcohol are just tired of putting so much attention on it and thinking about it, all of the mental chatter, which I think increases the more that you drink. And then the process of changing it, I think, looks like taking some kind of a break. It doesn't need to be dry January. It doesn't need to be an entire month. And in fact, a lot of those approaches, I think that they work well for people, but oftentimes there's a finite end to it. And so I'm going to take a month off and then I'm just going to go back to it. Whereas you're really not learning how to approach alcohol in a different way. You're really not developing any sort of mindful practices around it when you just abstain from it without really digging into some of the underlying thoughts and the emotions that are behind the drinking. But giving yourself a break, whether it's like a couple days, whether it's a couple weeks, whether it's a couple days during the week, just to notice the contrast in how you feel when you're not drinking, I think is really important so that you can start to develop desire for what it's like without alcohol.
I think that's why not having that restrictive mentality can really help you discern how you're actually feeling. Because I think a lot of people, they equate drinking with stress relief. That's how it's always kind of promoted. It's so much a part of our culture. It's Friday. We're going to go to happy hour. We're letting go, all of this stuff. And what they don't realize, and I think what neither of us really realize, is how much drinking increases your anxiety, how much it actually makes you feel worse. For me, I noticed too, like my face was just so bloated. My body was so bloated from drinking. Even just like I only would have like maybe a glass of wine a night.
Right.
But especially when you're doing this over time, you're really taxing out your liver, especially if you're eating foods that are on the richer scale, maybe even more saturated fat than your body really can handle. That's when you start to build up non-alcoholic and alcoholic fatty liver problems. And so those problems really do seep out into everything. It affects your sleep. You do gain weight. I mean, there's a lot of empty calories. So just gaining awareness and then comparing. That's what happened to me. Once I stopped drinking on that regular basis, just that one glass of wine a night, I could tell the difference. So palpable when I would go out and have a drink, especially if I had to work the next day. And I think you'd actually, when you drink consistently, you also develop a tolerance and you'll drink more to try to get whatever buzz you can get from alcohol. But when you cut down drastically on drinking, then having one drink in a week as opposed to every night, you really feel the effects of the drinking. And it doesn't necessarily feel good when you are really aware of how your body is. Tell our listeners how, if they can relate to this. And you talked about not having an all or nothing attitude. What would be their first step in reducing drinking?
Well, the first step is just to take some kind of a break. Even if it's for one day, even if ideally 2 days, because sometimes that first day you're not, I'm sure you agree with this, right? There is a significant compound effect of not drinking over time. So you really start to feel better and better the more time you give it. But even just giving yourself some kind of a break to notice that maybe you're sleeping a little bit better, to notice that you're waking up with more energy and you're feeling more focused, that maybe your mood is elevated, and start really drawing attention in your mind to those benefits. Start building desire for more of that. Start noticing just the enjoyment in not drinking, right? It's okay that you can still have a drink the next day. And then what I recommend is that you decide if you want to have a drink the next day or in the next couple of days. You do that. You decide, okay, how many drinks am I going to have? You just make a decision. Okay, I think I want to just have 3 and see how I feel, for example. My recommendation is that you plan the drinking so that you're not drinking for emotional reasons. So that you're not drinking to de-stress, so that you're not drinking because you feel lonely, so that you're not drinking because you're angry and you're trying to take the edge off. You're just drinking for the sake of just enjoying it. And that you spend some time that day trying to work through whatever emotions came up for you before you have the drink. So that you can start to build a habit of just working through your feelings, identifying how you feel, trying to find new ways of coping with your feelings. I don't know, maybe going for a walk, maybe journaling, maybe talking to your spouse if you're upset about something, talking to your boss, figuring out what can I do in this situation, or even just saying, there's nothing I can do. I'm going to feel sad about this. I'm just going to allow myself to feel that way for a few minutes and just notice how it feels. Okay.
Yes.
And then a little bit later, I'm going to have my glass of wine and I'm going to pay attention to it. And I'm going to enjoy the flavor of it. I'm also going to notice, how does it make me feel when I'm really listening to my body? What am I noticing about the difference in how I feel as I'm drinking this? I just want to start developing some more awareness around this. And then from that place of being very conscious with your drinking, it's easier to stop after a couple of glasses. If you're not drinking out of emotional reasons, if you're not doing it mindlessly.
Yes. I would say too, for me, there was something satisfying about having a glass of wine at the end of the day. It was a special drink. Like it wasn't, I'm big on hydrating. I've got tea. I've always got my water. So I've always got a beverage. I've always got at least one beverage, if not two or three around me.
Me too.
And I
Yeah,
I love it. And I love flavoring my water. I love all sorts of different kinds of tea. I have a special tea mid-morning and I have a special tea at afternoon. And I realized that I wanted something special
Yes.
when I was done with work. And so it was wine, because obviously that's the time where you can have a special beverage and you're not working. Well, what I actually did is I got myself a soda stream. I started to make myself just sparkling citrus water. And I thought, that's pretty special.
Yeah.
That always makes me feel really good. And it's all refreshing. It's sparkly. It's citrusy. And so I started to drink that at the end of the day. And that really did the trick for me. I was like, oh, that's all I really needed, was just to know psychologically, this is the end of the day. I am done with all of the work beverages and all of the work stuff.
Yeah.
And it's wonderful and it's refreshing. And I mean, what a great replacement for me for wine. And it gave me the same psychological relief that I was looking for. Turning off the computer, I am at home with my dogs, with my family. I'm eating food, but this is the beverage that I'm going to go for, especially during the weekdays when I want to wake up in the morning and feel refreshed. And I want to be able to work out, and I don't want to feel sluggish, and I don't want to have difficulty with my sleep. Then when I go out and I have a nice dinner with people, that's when I can enjoy a beverage or two and know that's my special time to do that. I haven't completely stopped drinking, but I drastically reduced it and am definitely the happier for it. And it sounds like you are too. So let me ask you this. In your coaching program, how much of it is about food and how much is it about drink with your clients? Or is it a joint effort in terms of weight loss?
Well, it depends on the client. So I have my membership program, my monthly membership program, where members have the opportunity to schedule coaching sessions with me every 2 weeks. They're short coaching sessions, but then we have workshops every week, and I have a curriculum that I created that incorporates everything that I teach on overeating and over drinking. So there are people inside of that membership that struggle with both. There are some people that just need help losing weight. There are some people who just want to cut back on drinking. There are some people where there's an overlap, where they struggle with both. I do have a number of clients that I work with one-on-one for longer sessions and private coaching who are primarily focused on changing their relationship with drinking. And I really do think longer sessions are the appropriate place for that, because there's usually more underneath the surface that we have to work through. So it really just depends. It depends on what somebody needs help with. It's the kind of work, though, that just really helps you become so much more aware of your body, so much more aware of your emotional life, whether you're working on drinking, whether you're working on eating. You develop so much more understanding of yourself that you can apply these tools to your relationship with food. You can apply it to other things in life, to goals that you have. So there is a lot of overlap in the tools that I teach around both of those things.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. And I think that's something that kind of sets you apart too, is just having that focus there as a part of weight loss. I don't think people tend to think about drinking as much when it comes to gaining weight, but copious amounts of studies and plenty of anecdotal and scientific evidence that shows that over-consuming alcohol certainly poses a problem for our weight. So I'm going to pivot now, and I want to talk about your podcast, because your podcast is really wonderful and has a lot of inspired listeners. What are some of the most impactful success stories you've heard from people who've applied your advice on your podcast?
Well, since we've been talking about drinking, there have been a couple of women that I can think of specifically who either decided to work with me after listening to the podcast, or were doing this work independently, just applying some of the things that they learned in my podcast, and were able to pretty dramatically change their drinking. And it didn't look like a perfect path from point A to point B. It looked like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And I think one of the things that I guess is true with all the people who I've worked with on drinking that I just get so excited about is how much their relationships improve. They say to me, I feel so much better. And in a lot of cases, they've lost weight that they weren't expecting to lose. They start to identify as a more positive person. They say things like, I actually like myself. I actually am a fun person to be around. I never knew that because the drinking was getting in the way. But one of the amazing things is my marriage has improved. My relationship with my kids is so much better. And that just really speaks to me because I guess that's what I experienced when I changed my drinking, is just so much more present as a mom, just much more engaged with my husband, just more alert, bringing more of myself to my relationships, paying more attention to people. One of the other symptoms for me of just drinking too much that I really didn't like is just that I just was so tired all of the time. And I just wanted to crawl into bed, and I just didn't have the energy. I didn't have the energy or the focus to be fully present and engaged in my life. And so to hear from some of these people who have applied the tools that I teach and really been able to make so many improvements on their relationships is just really gratifying. I just am so touched by that. So it's always wonderful to hear from people who listen to the podcast who I've never really spoken to, who say, you don't know me, but I've been listening to your podcast for the last couple of years and I've lost 30 pounds. That's what it's all about. I mean, I started my podcast because I thought, if I can just help one person see that there are other options other than dieting, who can see the possibility that they can feel better in midlife than they ever believed possible, then it's totally worth it to me.
Absolutely.
It's totally worth it.
I love that. And I think for anybody out there listening, we live right now in a get it fast kind of society and mentality. We're in this age of like weight loss medications, and this is a magic pill for this and this. And what research is consistently showing us is that there is no magic pill. Even if you take weight loss medications, once you go off of them, you most likely gain the weight back. So it's so important that we learn sustainable strategies, sustainable methods. If weight loss is a goal for us, or improving our relationship with ourselves and food and drink, or a combination. And doing this work may seem like a lot of, quote, work to people, but once you really start to engage in it, you really realize how it improves every aspect of your life, not just your relationship with yourself and your food. So I know we're close to the end of this podcast. Tell people how they can contact you and work with you and how they can listen to your podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. So my podcast is called Weight Loss for Food Lovers. You can find it on my website, mollyzemek.com. You can also find it on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify. My website is the best place to go to access some of the free trainings that I have available. If you'd like to contact me, you can contact me through my website. I think, yeah, those are the best places.
Wonderful. And we're going to have that in the show notes, you guys. Molly, you are just a wonderful force of nature out there, really helping people achieve sustainable change and weight loss and improving the relationship with food. I feel like we're definitely sisters in that quest. And so I'm really glad that you're out there doing what you're doing. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tovar. It was really a pleasure and a privilege to be here talking with you today.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for joining us on the ANEW Insight Podcast. We look forward to our next exciting interview and really hope you join us next time.
Thanks for tuning into the ANEW Insight Podcast. Please remember, the contents shared on this podcast is for entertainment purposes only and does not constitute medical advice. You can find us anywhere podcasts are streaming, on YouTube at my.anew.insight and at anew-insight.com under the ANEW Insight Podcast tab. And follow us on our socials at my.anew.insight on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Threads for more updates. Tune in next time and evolve with us.